It is Tuesday, and it's another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Is Jackson Kowar finally finding himself in the bullpen? Brady Singer is apparently out of answers, and a really cool moment for a rookie who was making his debut tonight for the Royals. That's all coming up next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And you can catch all of these podcasting episodes on wherever you get your podcast, just like Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, and on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If this is your first episode ever tuning into Locked On Royals, we always welcome you here. And even though the season may be more than just a down year, sometimes downright unwatchable, we try to keep it fun here. We try to give you the best possible content. As for myself, I'm just a lifelong Royals fan like you. I'm assuming if you're tuning into this episode for the first time and you're still watching this team in mid-September, you are in some way, shape, or form a diehard Royals fan, and that's what I would like to consider myself. I just turned that fandom into a career path. I now work here in Kansas City for Sports Radio 810 WHB. I have daily shows on ESPN Kansas City. I've also got a show once a week. Actually, tomorrow night, I will be on 810 Sports Radio from 7 to 10 p.m. So if you ever want to get my thoughts or hear my thoughts, other than baseball, talking some NFL, talking some college football, college basketball in the future, you can always do so there. But the easiest way to find all that is just going to my Twitter handle at JohnnyJ_15. Again, that's at JOHNYJ_15. I thought this would be a really good time to spend the last week or so, or let's go last couple weeks. I don't really want to speak for myself as to what may be coming and next week's episodes or the week after that, but we all know that we're coming down to it. This is the final stretch of the season. For many of us, you can't wait for the offseason. For some of you, it's already football season. Hey, I don't blame you. But at least here on Locked On Royals, we're going to continue to give you the content and try to dig a little bit deeper for some content that maybe isn't being talked about enough. And one guy that I think deserves a little bit more recognition, even with a small sample size, is Jackson Kowar. Now, Jackson Kowar is the one guy to me that has been such an anomaly in the Royals organization since they've drafted him and where his expectations have really ranged from. I remember when Jackson Kowar was making his way through Wilmington, when he got to AA Northwest Arkansas, even when he got to AAA Omaha, I looked at him and said, this is a guy that can be a frontline starter for you. Now, I understand that in baseball, you can't always buy minor league stats. You can't always overreact to what a guy does in AA, because at the end of the day, it is a massive, monumental jump from AA to the big leagues. But the one thing with Jackson Kowar, I truly believe, it's never been a physical thing. It has never been a stuff thing, because when you look at him throw the ball, when you see his arsenal, it's not bad stuff. When you're throwing mid to upper 90s and you've got a really good changeup, pair it alongside a curveball and a slider you just developed, stuff's not bad. And even though the numbers overall this year haven't been great, there is something to take away from this last, couple week stretch, because Jackson Kowar right now is enjoying probably the best stretch of his big league career. It seems like he's finally settled into a role. And to me, even if the ERA was high, which his overall ERA is high, even if the strikeout numbers were down, I'm not really reading into that, because the one thing with Jackson Kowar that he could never get over, the mental hurdle he could never, surpass after making his debut, was command. His big league debut was a disaster because he couldn't throw strikes. And when he did try to live in the zone, he would be rocked. And now in the bullpen, He's sort of just found this role that, dare I say, he fits really well in. Now, if you've tuned into one of my episodes before, you would know my thoughts on the bullpen, that I really don't think there's many guys you want back in 2024. You can kind of purge it. You can cleanse it a little bit. I mean, John McMillan to me was the one guy you keep. You move on from there. But I will say I'm intrigued by Jackson Kowar because it would sting a lot for Jackson Kowar to fall in line with what the 2018 class has provided you, which we'll talk about Brady Singer here shortly. But to me, this is a guy that I just don't know if you want to chalk up as just a bust. He can get innings. He can be in this bullpen because I truly believe the Royals are not going to go in this offseason and erase 7 or 8 guys for that bullpen. They're going to try to keep some guys because right now, for lack of a better term, this is a tryout for them. And I would say that Jackson Kowar in this specific role is doing pretty well. Now, let me be honest and let me be clear with this. This is not to say that Jackson Kowar is now going to become this back-end specialist. He could be a closer. None of that. But here's the thing. You need guys that can simply just get you outs in spots where you need them to eat innings. Would anybody complain if Jackson Kowar was the inning eater or the guy that comes in when it's 6-2 in the 8th inning and you just need 6 outs? No, I think he'd be one of those guys. And when I mean 6-2 game, you're trailing. Maybe you don't give Jackson Kowar a spot when the team's leading. If he's comfortable in this spot, maybe that's a solution you have for 2024 because you need some guys like that. I'd much rather give that spot to Jackson Kowar than Colin Snyder or Steven Cruz or Tucker Davidson or John Heasley. I would like to see, with a full offseason and now with some confidence under his belt, if he could take this role and run with it. Because baseball is such a mental sport. It's mentally draining. From personal experience, I quit baseball because of mental things. And that's why when I see players sometimes struggle on the mound, can't throw strikes, or you have the yips or things like that. I've experienced that before. I know what that's like. And not to say that I know it on the same level as them. I've never been in the big leagues. I never played college ball. But I would say that a mental hurdle is a lot harder to climb over than just a couple of good outings. But for Jackson Kowar, I think he needed to see this. He needed to have a stretch like this, especially to close the year. It does not mean he's going to be great in 2024, but it certainly keeps the door open because if Jackson Kowar never improved this year, he probably would have been taken off the 40-man roster. Now, there's a ray of light. There's a glimmer of hope. And that's something I think you can buy into a little bit because the stuff's there. The stuff is always something I've wanted to believe in, but if you can't throw it for a strike or when you're throwing it in the zone, it's right over the heart of the plate, you're just as valuable as a guy that has low 90s stuff and can't locate it. I mean, just because you throw hard doesn't make you a tremendously valuable player. It makes you a very raw talent. Steven Cruz is a raw talent in the bullpen, which is why I would like to see the Royals work with him a little bit. You throw 100, 101, 102. I'm hoping that you can transform that into something where it is a back-end guy. Maybe Jackson Kowar can work this offseason, continue to improve that slider, and pair it with that changeup, and you've got a decent bullpen guy. But I just wanted to acknowledge that we have not seen a stretch like this, as small as it's been in Jackson Kowar's career. You would be lucky to get 2 straight outings in which he didn't give up a run. In his last 7 2/3 innings, he's only given up 2 runs. He's only walked 1 guy. And to me, that's a very important stat. Limited walks. Limiting hard hits. Now, he doesn't need big strikeout numbers. We know the stuff is there. So to me, you just need to find a guy who can locate it well. You have a firm fastball, really good changeup. That can work in a certain role in this bullpen. But maybe it's not the end of the line for Jackson Kowar. Maybe there is a role for this guy in 2024, but it's got to be earned still. He's not going in 2024 with a lock spot in this bullpen. He's got to go on a tear in these last couple of weeks, and then he's got to come ready to go in pitchers and catchers report in February and take that role in spring training. All I'm saying now, that door is not closed. There could be just a creak there. it could be a little sliver of light for him to find a way to a successful big league career. It's a long shot, but at least now we know that door is not completely closed. Okay, the next guy we're going to talk about is Jackson Kowar's college teammate in Brady Singer. He was not good at all against Chicago in game 1 of the doubleheader. But what irked me a little bit is, once again, Brady Singer has no answers for his struggles. We're going to dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Jack Johnson. You can follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, let's give a shout out to today's title sponsor in Sleeper. My fantasy picks from last night were just not very good. Those were some pretty putrid picks, trying to predict what would happen in game 1 and game 2 of the doubleheader. That was just a bad one on my part. I put faith in Brady Singer, and it didn't work out. So what I'm going to do is throw 2 picks in for the Dodgers and Padres game later on tonight. I'm going to take Juan Soto having more than 1 hit in this game, and also I'm going to go with the star of the LA Dodgers and Mookie Betts. I guess I could pick a couple of stars here, but I'm going to go with Mookie Betts here to have a multi-hit game against San Diego. Only thing that would bite me in the butt is if they're not going to be in the lineup. They'd have to do that coming in as a late replacement in the game. But those are my 2 picks. Not going to pick a Royal here. Think I'm going to go with another game on the West Coast, a late game between the Padres and the Dodgers. Now, with Sleeper, the MLB playoffs are right around the corner, which means the clock is ticking on your chance to 100 times your cash on daily fantasy baseball. Baseball has never been more exciting than it is right now with studs like Ronald Acuna Jr., Mookie Betts, who I picked, and Shohei Ohtani. Pick more or less on stats for these stars like home runs, hits, strikeouts, and more for up to 100 times the payout on Sleeper. Get your picks right, and you could win big with Sleeper. I will say that Brady Singer has been maybe the most reoccurring character on Locked On Royals. We have discussed him time and time again. Because in a season like this, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about guys who aren't going to be there. We're going to talk about guys who may or may not, but if they're not going to be a part of the future, there's going to be a pretty big reason. Whether they're traded, they're DFA'd, and Brady Singer, I think, fits that mold. People care what happens to Brady Singer. And today, I think I got my definitive answer for Brady Singer. He doesn't need to pitch for the rest of the year. That's for sure. The velo was a career low for him today in a single game. David Lesky on Twitter pointed out he's one of the best Royals follows out there at DB Lesky. Brady Singer's velo was way down. He was tagged for 5 runs in the first inning. Now he rebounded and tossed zeros for the next 4 innings, but then was tagged for an additional run in the 6th inning when Matt Quatraro tried to stick with him. But I get it, a doubleheader, you try to get some length out of your starter. The thing with Brady Singer that has always bugged me, that is never really sat right with me, is that when things don't go well for him, you just kind of have a guy that doesn't give you an answer. I know at times when you're a pitcher in the big leagues, you can chalk it up and say, hey, didn't have my best stuff today. Tip my cap to them. I was leaving my pitch out over the plate too much. I didn't have a good grip on my changeup. Fastball didn't have the run that I wanted it to. It just wasn't my day. You'll hear pitchers say that all the time. And today, Brady Singer was asked about his velocity, and his answer was just, I don't know. I don't know what it is. The exact quote here came from Annie Rogers, another great Royals Twitter follow because she is the beat writer, for the Kansas City Royals. She asked Brady Singer what the level of concern is with the velo being down again, and he says he feels physically fine. Quote, not much concern. I don't know why it's down. If I knew, I'd obviously fix it. I'd like to have it back. I'm not sure. I really don't have any answers for you. To me, I don't know why it feels like there should be more there. If your velo's down, maybe express a little bit more concern than I don't know what it is. I feel like every pitcher has an answer. It doesn't need to be an excuse either. I don't think Brady Singer wants to make an excuse. And I'm sure he's just kind of confused about the velo, but it feels like you would know a little of something, right? If it's not an injury concern, then there's something you're doing mechanically That could be someone to say, oh, I feel like my mechanics have been off a little bit. I'm just not getting the strength coming out of my back leg. I can't plant right on the mound. My fastball where I'm trying to locate it, it's just not coming out of my hand as great. I don't know. It feels like there's a variety of ways you could have answered it other than, I don't know. I don't know why it's down. If I knew, I'd fix it. Well, we all would hope that. But this is a concern here. Right? For some pitchers, when the velo's down, you may say, well, my arm's been fatigued a little bit. Or a manager may come out and say, yeah, he's been dealing with some soreness, and I think we're going to shelve him for a little bit. If there's no injury concern, then what could it possibly be? My only answer is mechanical. I mean, we had this discussion with Dylan Coleman, going from 98, 99, and 100 to 92, 93, and 94. Then by the end of it, becoming predominantly a slider pitcher, a breaking ball pitcher. And that's for a guy that you had as a flamethrower in your bullpen. I mean, Josh Staumont, same thing, but both those guys had injuries. And then you could argue that Dylan Coleman's was more mechanical than anything and trusting your stuff. Does Brady Singer trust his stuff? I mean, he threw a lot of his sinker fastball hybrid today. But again, it's the lack of throwing the changeup. The stuff's not as sharp. And at this point, there's no need to start him for the rest of the year. There's really not. I preferably would not like to see Brady Singer out there because I don't think there's anything to gain. Brady Singer could go out there and shove for his final 2 or 3 starts, but it doesn't really change what this season has been, which has been a disaster. We had the great stretch to begin the second half, but to close it out, it's been just as bad as the first. And maybe you just chalk it up as a lost year. Move on from it. And get right, get fresh in the offseason. Go back to work and show up to spring training ready to go. Don't, have any other exhibition games you're playing in. There's going to be no WBC, so no worry about that. Him and Bobby Witt Jr. are going to be there from the get-go. I know I entertained the idea of a trade at one point. Makes no sense at this point. But I don't know. I feel like, there has to be more of an answer there. I don't need the answer. I'm not begging for an answer, but it kind of rubs you the wrong way, or you just get a little frustrated if you're noticing this is a big-time problem and your velo is not supposed to be sitting 90, 91 if you're Brady Singer. Or Brady Singer's velo, when it's really going, is 94, 95, and 96. Now, where is that version? It's not that cold out. I mean, it looked a little chilly today in Chicago. It's getting into football weather. But for the majority of the year, the velo's been down. We haven't seen that sharp version of Brady Singer. And you have the rest for arm fatigue. I don't want to speak for him and say that, it's a scenario in which he's just not really caring. That doesn't seem like him. I mean, he's a competitor. He's supposed to be the workhorse, but right now, he's lost, man. He is absolutely lost. This is back-to-back outings against a bad Chicago offense. They've made him look silly. And it's just, it's stuff I feel like you can control at times. He's walking guys left and right. It feels like sometimes when you walk the bases loaded, you walk 2 of the last 3, you got to let your defense play. Got to pitch to contact. And it doesn't feel like he's doing that. He's not trusting his stuff. His stuff doesn't look good. This is a concern. And if it's not going to get better, shut him down. Give somebody else a chance to start. I don't care if it's Angel Serpa or Alec Marsh. It just can't be Brady Singer. There's nothing more to gain this year. It's just been a lost year. Chalk it up as a lost year and move on. Start over, start fresh. That's good for his mental aspect here. He doesn't need to go out there and struggle. He doesn't. His arm is tired. And I know that people are going to be frustrated with it, but I'd rather him get rest, get focused, be ready for next year than try to force the issue here down the stretch. Because it just does not look like it's getting any better for Brady Singer. Now, to close out the show, we're going to end it on a positive note because Logan Porter had a really cool moment in Game 2 for the Royals tonight. And I just want to give praise to guys who worked their tail off in the minor leagues to get a chance this year for Kansas City. We're diving into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further and talk about Logan Porter, let's give a shout out to one of today's other sponsors in Gametime. Now, I've discussed Gametime before, and I'm going to continue doing it because it is the app that I use when buying tickets for Royals games, Chiefs games, concerts, you name it. It is so simple to use, whether you're going by yourself, you're going with your parents, you're going with your grandparents, girlfriend, boyfriend, going with a big group of people. It's so simple to use. There's no hassle there. And we've got a great offer for you in general. But don't worry about the stress of buying tickets last minute, buying tickets well ahead of time. Gametime has you covered. It is so easy to use. It's the best app to use when buying tickets. Now, with Gametime, here's what you need to do. Right after this podcast episode, go and download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. The terms apply. So again, create your account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. I will say this year that one thing that has brought me a lot of joy has seen lifelong minor leaguers get a chance to play at the big league level. And maybe some of you don't care about that. Some of you only care if a prize prospect is going to make his debut in Kansas City. But to me, being a guy, and like many of you listening, if you are listening this late in the season, you care about some of these guys and you've heard about some of these guys, and it's cool to see them get their shot. And Logan Porter, to me, was a guy that I think deserved this shot a long time ago. He's an easy guy to root for, and he got his chance in game 2 of this doubleheader and came up in his very first plate appearance and ripped a 2-run single up the middle. And I could only imagine what's going through his mind, what's going through his head, because for a lot of us out there, we've never experienced that. We've never experienced stepping foot on a major league diamond. It doesn't matter if there's 10 people in the crowd. I mean, you put on a uniform with the Major League Baseball logo, you know that you've made it. And there's no guarantee that Logan Porter is on this roster next year. There's not. Just like I said with Dairon Blanco, who became inches short from becoming the first Royal to hit for the cycle since George Brett. Freddie Fermin has made the most of his chances. Now he had a fractured finger, which is probably going to sideline him for the rest of the year, but making the most of an opportunity that's not going to come around a lot. In baseball, when you have teams like the Royals and the A's, you're going to get a lot of guys chomping at the bit for a big league opportunity. And they've gotten it here in Kansas City. Not just a Logan Porter, not just a Freddie Fermin, a Dairon Blanco. Somebody like a James MacArthur, 26 years old in the Philly system, he gets his chance in Kansas City. Steven Cruz gets that chance in Kansas City. These are all cool things to witness, as bad as this year has been. And again, I don't, love all of this for just the grand scheme of things, because at the end of the day, when you're losing 101 games, 102 games, it's not very fun. But there's a silver lining. It's cool to see some of these guys get a shot. It doesn't mean they've got a future here in Kansas City, but it's cool to see a guy work his tail off for 4, 5, 6 years at the minor league level to get this opportunity. And I always think that is a remarkable thing that you can achieve. You are a good baseball player if you can get to the bigs. It doesn't matter what age you are. And there's great stories all throughout the Royals minor league level. From rookie ball to low A to high A to double A to triple A. Everybody's got a story. And to me, when you see moments like this, especially with Logan Porter, you just can appreciate it, because myself, a lot of you listening, you weren't on the buses, traveling from minor league park to minor league park. You weren't at those games where nobody was there, or having to play a doubleheader in 105-degree heat out there in El Paso or in the outskirts of Vegas. You didn't have to do that. You didn't have to be away from family or live out of a suitcase. Logan Porter had to do that. And then eventually he gets his chance. He gets that call at the big league level. One of my favorite baseball movies is Bull Durham. And I always love it when all the minor league players are asking Crash Davis about what it's like at the big league level. He's talking about the luxuries of having all that. I'm not saying Bull Durham's completely accurate, but I did cover, independent league baseball here in Kansas City for a full season. Covered the Kansas City Monarchs. They won another American Association championship. They really revamped themselves. And I had the chance to interview every single day one of these players. And their stories were incredible. And what they had to go through, why they were still doing it. Everybody's got their reasons why they still do it. And that's why when I see a guy like Logan Porter or Dairon Blanco, you could look at them and go, why don't just hang it up? Why don't just give up? You're never going to be a big league part of this team. You're never going to be a future star. You're not going to have your face on a poster. They were probably told all of that. Somebody had to have. But when you stick with it, it can show how important this game really is. Not to get super emotional or anything, but that's what makes baseball great, is that in seasons as bad as this, Logan Porter's never going to forget it. He's never going to forget that first at bat at Guaranteed Rate Field in game 2 of a doubleheader where he rips a 2-run single up the middle. He can tell his children and his grandchildren about that, because that is something that is really cool in this sport, as bad as this team is. And it's something that, keeps me watching. I was excited to watch Logan Porter get that chance, and he had a multi-hit game. His very first chance to do so. In his mind, he's thinking, I can stick around here. And that's what I like seeing, especially from this team. Just because you lose 100, 110 games doesn't mean, it's close up shop and move on time to the offseason. These are guys that are going to really value these final 15 games. It doesn't mean anything for 2024, but it means something to them. And that, being a baseball fan, being a Royals fan, that's important to me. Because these guys, for playing 300, 400, 500 minor league games, and to get this chance, I can't imagine what's going through their mind. You have stories around baseball right now with Jackson Holliday being 19 years old and already in AAA. He's never going to have to go through what a Logan Porter did, what a Dairon Blanco did, what a Freddie Fermin did. He's not a James MacArthur, because he's a top prospect and he's being elevated quickly in a very loaded farm system. But Logan Porter, he spent 5 years at the minor league level, 22 games shy of 400. Guys like Bubba Starling in the past dealing with the pressure of being a top pick. And no, it was not a good pick for the Royals. But what I always admired and what I always loved for him is that he did get to the big league level. He got that chance to say that I just made it. I got a hit. I had a home run at the big league level. That shouldn't be taken lightly. That's a cool thing to do. And it was really cool for Logan Porter in his major league debut tonight against Chicago White Sox, where he had a multi-hit game and a pair of RBIs. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. You can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And find all of our podcasting episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, and Google Podcast, as well as YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. But until tomorrow, you take it easy, Kansas City.